Thank you all for having me in your community today, and thank you, Gordon, for the work that you do, that you've done for the humanist movement your whole life, for the work you're doing to build community here. There's a Harvard political scientist named Theda Skocpol who studied in the first Trump administration what was most impactful at dislodging an authoritarian government. And she said it wasn't the Women's March, and it wasn't the ACLU and their lawsuits. It was about 3,000 small, localized groups across the country, like your group, Gordon, where people came together to share ideas, to share information, and to fight back. And so one of the things we're focusing on at the American Humanist Association is building humanist communities across the country that can fight for our values and build community. We've added 30 of them around the country in just the last year. So it is good to be with you. It's good to be here in Boulder. I have to say, being invited to talk about humanism in Boulder is a little bit like being asked to talk about the wonders of snow to a room full of ski instructors. I mean, you guys have more yoga studios per capita than convenience stores. If I can't make a case for humanism here, I want to find another job. As Gordon said, my name is Fish Stark, and I am proud to be the executive director of the American Humanist Association. We work on behalf of the 46 million Americans who believe science tells us what is real and empathy tells us what is right. And we work to build positive identity and community for the many Americans living without traditional religion and mobilize them to fight for the separation of religion and government and civil rights, or as the Trump administration calls it, terrorism. This fulfills a lifelong dream. I was an argumentative kid, and I hoped I would one day grow up to run the American Association of People Who Agree with Me. That's a joke that works on two levels. For those of you who are familiar with humanism, we don't agree on very much. That's sort of our deal. Yeah, anyone hear the old joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions? So our version of that is 2 humanists, 4.5 opinions, and a board subcommittee about whether you can have half an opinion. My fiance taught me that joke. She is a secular Jew. You don't know what they call it when a secular Jew and a Unitarian humanist get married? What? Interfaithless marriage. She was trying to remember that joke one time. She said, an unfaithful marriage. I said, I hope not. She has come to love our Unitarian church in Annapolis, although she still refers to us sometimes as the island of misfit goys. A little bit about me, since I'm a stranger in your house today. I came to this work through a long and winding road. I studied developmental psychology, first at Yale and then at Harvard, specifically how people come to develop their moral and ethical beliefs, and how those beliefs shape our sense of meaning and purpose, and shape what we do in this world. And I spent the last decade working in what I would call applied humanism, or what others might call education. So I worked with the Red Cross and Lady Gaga's foundation to build award-winning youth leadership programs that were used to train young democracy activists all over the world. And then I went to Silicon Valley and I built a successful tech startup to improve child mental health. As Gordon said, I do a little bit of stand-up comedy on the weekends, and I grew up as a lifelong Unitarian Universalist and humanist, second generation in both of those traditions, in a family where questioning was treated as a form of love. My father, Pete Stark, was the first open atheist to serve in the United States Congress. And in 2012, he was dislodged after 40 years of service by a man who attacked him for his atheism. That gentleman's name was Eric Swalwell. We've been hearing a lot about him in the news lately. It's cosmically. I don't believe in karma, but I do believe that if you're a jerk of a person, sometimes it comes back to bite you, and that's what we're seeing. So it's nice to have your faith in humanity affirmed in that sense. I want to talk to you about 3 things today, and my goal is to go on, no more than half an hour, and then leave time for robust time for questions. First, what is humanism, really? Because a lot of people have a vague sense, but they're not quite sure. And some people have come into this room today saying, well, I'm not sure what I am. I'm not sure if I'm anything. My goal is not to convert people to humanism so much as it is to help people who are already humanist in their beliefs and behaviors recognize that you are part of a community that exists not just here in Boulder, but nationally and globally, and that for centuries has been a torch passed from person to person fighting for humane ideals. So that brings me to the second thing I want to do. I want to tell a story about how humanism and humanists have shaped this country from its founding right up until today. A story whose characters I think might surprise some people. And third, I want to talk about what humanists are fighting for right now. Because this is a moment in American history that requires us, all of us, to be clear about who we are and what we are willing to defend, what we are willing to sacrifice to defend. If I only have 10 seconds to explain humanism, I will say, you are a humanist if you believe in the golden rule but not in God. Or you are a humanist if you believe, as I said, science tells you what is real and compassion tells you what is right. By a little more time, I will say that humanists believe in people. We believe in human dignity, the idea that everyone has equal worth without needing to be saved or redeemed. Human potential, that there is no problem that humans can't solve, no truth we can't uncover as long as we live in free societies. And human responsibility, that our highest good, our highest obligation, is helping our neighbors live lives of freedom and flourishing in the here and now. We believe that what makes people special and important and worth fighting for is not an immortal soul or an intelligently designed body, but consciousness. Our ability to think for ourselves, to imagine better futures for ourselves and the people around us, to build lives of meaning and purpose from the infinite canvas of a free mind. And I think the fact that we evolved from fish and built civilizations is in itself about all the miracle that any of us should ever need. Humanism is sometimes confused with atheism, and there's a lot of overlap, but they're not the same thing. Atheism's primary argument with religion is about the existence of God. Humanism's primary argument with religion, I would argue, is about the existence of original sin. The idea that people are born broken, that they must earn worthiness through submission, that our nature is corrupt, and that our only hope lies in bending the knee to a higher authority, that the path to a better world comes from condemning our neighbors, the way they were born to live and born to love, that we are, each of us, failures waiting to happen who must be managed and controlled. I find that not just wrong, but deeply profane. And it was humanists, the humanistic psychologists, folks like Dr. Carl Rogers and Dr. Abraham Maslow and you may know this one, Dr. Benjamin Spock, who created client-centered psychology and the hierarchy of needs, who proved that that kind of shame is not a path to a better world, that we cannot grow from shame, that improving ourselves and improving the world around us comes from adopting a hopeful ideal of who we want to become and working towards it, seeing ourselves not as broken, inherently sinful, but instead as reservoirs of wisdom and kindness and heroism waiting to be drawn out. Humanists believe in the inherent wholeness, not the inherent brokenness of every person. And we believe it not just because it's an ideal, but because we love data. And it's been found consistently and comprehensively that when we treat people this way, as capable and worthy, that is when we become our healthiest, most productive selves and build a better world. This distinction matters more than it might sound at first because your view of humanity determines your politics. If you believe people are born broken, you build systems of control. You build hierarchies where the righteous can control the wicked. But if you believe people are inherently valuable and capable, you build systems of liberation. You build public school. You build democracy. Belief systems are about more than who made the world and what happens after we die. They're theories about where morality lives, where power belongs, and where truth resides. We have a cynic in the White House today who misappropriates the language of God because he reveres not Jesus but power. And the language of God has been used by authoritarians for millennia to tell people when they ask about truth and power and morality that it does not rightfully belong to them, but somewhere else. And when you ask humanists where morality lives, where power belongs, where truth resides, the answer is always in all of us. We believe the higher power that we are searching for is our common humanity. I want to tell you a story about America that I think is not told enough, because to understand what we at the AHA are fighting for now, you have to understand what humanists have already built. So before America was a nation, it was an idea. It was a very dangerous, radical idea that threatened the old world order. The idea, which was articulated by Thomas Paine in his pamphlet Common Sense, where he said the cause of America, as in a great deal the cause of all mankind, was that authority to govern does not come from a divine king or an ancient bloodline, but from consent of the governed. Paine was a humanist. He famously said, "To do good is my religion." And Thomas Jefferson, another humanist alongside him, together they dreamed of a nation where the liberty of conscience could be supreme, where the human mind would be free from the shackles of state-enforced religion, and every person would be able to make their own choice as to how to follow their conscience within the boundaries of the law. They were the architects of that original American innovation, as Congressman J.D. Raskin calls it, constitutional religious freedom. But we know that those early humanists at founding were flawed men who wrote immoral words they could not themselves live up to, with the exception of Paine, who was the only founder not to own slaves. They dreamt of equality while holding others in bondage. And so it fell to other humanists, generation after generation, to call the nation to account, to force America to live up to the hypocrisy between what was expressed in its founding ideals and the way they were written into the law. Consider another great American humanist, Frederick Douglass. He was an escaped slave who became one of the most powerful moral voices of the 19th century. Douglass was a fierce critic of the hypocrisy of Christian slaveholders. His humanism was forged in the fires of that righteous anger. He saw that true morality is not about the piety that you profess, but about how committed you are to human dignity. And he understood justice was not a gift from God, but a right to be demanded by humanity. Douglass gave us what I think is one of the most potent statements of the humanist ethos in action. He said, in the struggle for justice, the only reward is the opportunity to be in the struggle. He was to be in the struggle. He wasn't waiting for a savior. He was teaching us we are the ones who are coming to save us. And when the nation finally began to reckon in the 60s with its legacy of racial injustice, I wasn't around, but I heard that's what we were doing. Humanists stood at the center of the civil rights movement. A. Philip Randolph, a lifelong humanist, was the chairman of the 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his famous speech. And he was the founder of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which at the time was the nation's largest union led by a Black American. He understood that economic justice and racial justice were the same fight. And it was the brilliant, searing, unapologetically humanist James Baldwin who laid bare the soul of America, dissecting the pathologies of race and sex and power with a clarity that is still breathtaking today when you read him. He taught us that love is a force for revolution. And the same spirit, same humanist spirit, animated the fight for women's suffrage. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was another humanist. She wrote, famously, early in her career, a text called the Women's Bible that dared to critique the patriarchal underpinnings of religious texts. She argued that women's liberation required not just legal freedom, but social reimagining of the role of women in families and community. Humanism was the necessary framework for these women to imagine a world where they were defined not as they were written into the Bible, as daughters and wives and mothers, but as full and complete human beings, endowed with reason and deserving of autonomy. And later on, came humanists like Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem, who launched the second wave of feminism, giving voice to what they called the problem that has no name. They demanded a world where women were free to pursue their full potential. And when they were denied the basic right to control their own bodies, it was another humanist who led the fight. Planned Parenthood was founded by a humanist. And her mentor was another humanist, Emma Goldman, who was arrested in 1916 for handing out contraceptives on the streets of New York City, who famously said, "We only have as much freedom as we have the intelligence to want and the courage to take." And the American Humanist Association was the first national membership organization to support the right to an abortion, even half a decade before Planned Parenthood and before Roe v. Wade. This is a pattern you see again and again throughout American history. Humanists provide the spark, the radical reimagining of what's possible, and then lead the charge to make it real. When American civil liberties came under threat in the 20th century, when socialists and pacifists and immigrants were being rounded up and jailed for what they said and believed, Felix Adler, the founder of the ethical culture movement, one of the great humanists of his generation, helped build the organization that became the ACLU. The idea that free speech, free thought, free conscience deserve an institutional defender in American life came from humanists. And as we moved into the 20th century and we wrestled with the shift of industrialization, humanists again generated one of the ideas that shaped the modern world. John Dewey, a philosopher who helped found the American Humanist Association, fundamentally transformed American education by arguing that the purpose of public schools was not to train compliant factory workers, not to drill students in rote memorization, but to cultivate free thinking and critically minded citizens capable of participating in a democratic society. He said democracy has to be reborn every generation, and education is his midwife. And not far from where Dewey taught at the University of Chicago, you had Jane Addams, another humanist, who was putting that theory into practice at Hull House. It was more than just a charity for indigent Chicagoans. It was a center for community and art and advocacy. It built on the humanist conviction that every person, regardless of their origin, their status, possesses that inherent dignity and deserves that chance to flourish. And then, when the 20th century was haunted by devastating diseases, it was another humanist, Jonas Salk, who invented the polio vaccine. And in a development that seems unthinkable in a profit-driven world, he refused to patent the vaccine. They asked him, who owns the patent? And he said, well, the people own the patent. Could you patent the sun? And then, when the world was on the cusp of a technological revolution, it was another humanist, inventor, named Steve Wozniak, who co-founded Apple Computers and helped create the PC, which was more than a machine. It was a tool for individual empowerment. It took the power of a mainframe and it put it now into all of our pockets. Do you see the through line? Public schools, personal computers, polio vaccines, Planned Parenthood, all came from humanists, and not by accident, but because we believe that human progress comes from empowering everyday people to live their own lives on their own terms. From the halls of science to the halls of Congress, from the artist studio to the picket line, the story is the same. Humanism inspires us to believe in ourselves, believe in each other, and believe that better things are possible. Speaking of better things being possible, let's talk about America today. I want to talk plainly with you about the threat of Christian nationalism, because the phrase gets used a lot, and I'm not sure it's always well understood, and I think if we can be clear about what it is and what it isn't, we'll be much more effective at fighting it. So Christian nationalism is not the same thing as personal Christian faith. It is not the same thing as religion in public life. You might have heard this young man, James Talarico, in Texas, talk very passionately about his faith. He is not a Christian nationalist. Most Christians in this country reject Christian nationalism, as they should, because what Christian nationalism is asking for has very little to do with the teachings of Jesus. Christian nationalism is a political project. It's the claim that America was founded as and should be an explicitly religious state, where our laws and policies align with a particularly narrow, conservative interpretation of Christianity, and where citizens of that faith should enjoy a special, favored political standing. with second-class citizenship for the rest of us who have to live under their religious rules. As Thomas Paine knew, and as Thomas Jefferson knew, who wrote that in every country and in every age, the priest has been in alliance with the despot. They knew that putting religion at the center of government is always a tool of power consolidation. It's a tool for the powerful to claim the authority of God to justify their rule over everybody else. When religion becomes the law no longer belongs to the people. It belongs to whoever can wield the most power to claim that he represents the authority of God. Now, here is something I don't think gets said often enough, and it's the thing, if you take away anything, I want folks to understand this. Christian nationalism is not just a social issue. It is an economic issue. And if you look at the alliance that's driving Christian nationalism, you can understand that. Think about it. Why is Elon Musk, who I don't think has ever set foot in a church in his life, why is Elon Musk suddenly talking about God? Because the idea of secular law is the idea that no authority, not any church, not any king, not any billionaire, can supersede democracy. And that is very inconvenient for the billionaire class because there are fewer of them than us. If a corporation can claim a religious exemption to opt out of providing health care, or to ignore civil rights protections, or to bypass environmental regulations, the laws that protect working people in this country are optional. Look how quickly we went from employers claiming that their religion should exempt them from paying for birth control to employers successfully claiming to the US Supreme Court that because of their religion, they should not have to pay for unemployment insurance for their employees. In a Christian nation, so-called, you are going to see the CEO of Exxon find religion real quick and demand an exception from environmental law because the Bible says man is to have dominion over the earth. You're going to see the CEO of Amazon get in touch with his spiritual side and say there's nothing in his holy book that says anything about the minimum wage. They will still be able to get abortions for their mistresses under theocracy. In every society where religious law has ever been implemented, it binds the working class and it lets the wealthy through its loopholes. And alongside that, Christian nationalists want to funnel our tax dollars into mega churches and private school vouchers while they cut SNAP and Medicare. They use religion to keep us at each other's throats while the billionaires pick our pockets and they take a percentage. This is the coalition we are fighting. Cynical billionaires, theocratic clergy, and grievance-fueled bigots who have figured out a way to use each other to consolidate their own economic, cultural, and political power. I call these guys the axis of nonsense. The axis of nonsense. The bishops, the billionaires, and the bigots all working together. Their strategy is to make us feel helpless, to convince us the problems are too big, the forces are too powerful, the divisions are too deep. They want us to retreat into our corners and numb ourselves with endless scrolling and give up on the promise of democracy and the possibility of progress. They want us to believe no one is coming to save us. And on that point, humanists have always agreed with them. Because we are the ones who are coming to save us. That's the whole point of humanism. So here's why I'm optimistic, genuinely optimistic about what comes next. Because I think a lot of people in our country right now need a reason to. I want you all to think back to 1972. Again, I wasn't there, but I think some of you were. This is the year my dad was first elected to Congress. And that year, we had another demagogue who believed that he could make the law, who was deeply racist, who was throwing people in jail and deporting them for having principled disagreements with him about civil liberties. Richard Nixon, who won 49 states in a landslide. And 4 years later, was defeated by a humble peanut farmer from Georgia. Yeah. If we think anything about American history is fixed, we need to think again. There is an opportunity here not just to defeat Christian nationalism, but to defeat it in such a way that exposes its hypocrisy and allows us to build something better. And here is what I'm seeing on the ground that makes me believe that's possible. But first, I should say, I spent my whole career trying to help people develop a positive sense of agency, the belief that we can act on the world, that our actions matter, and that people around us are worth caring for. The honest truth is I don't know a better framework for that belief than humanism. I don't know of a worldview with a better track record at convincing people that they have power and they shouldn't wait for someone else to solve problems for them, but actually the beauty and majesty of the world comes from people who've taken it upon themselves to solve problems. So I don't want to lie and say the fight ahead is easy or that winning is a certainty. But we have won before, and we are winning again, even just in the last year under President Trump. So at the AHA, we are growing faster than at any time in recent memory. Contributions are up 60% last year. Just in February, we had 52% growth in membership compared to last February alone. We are seeing people who say, I am fed up with the state of the world as it is. I need a word for what I believe. That word is humanism, that this community is my community, this tradition is my tradition. And as that community grows, our political power and our legal power has grown. So let me talk about some of the big legal victories we've won over the Christian nationalists in the last year, just in case you think the courts are dead as a way to take this country back. In West Virginia, we teamed up with the ACLU, and in a state where the water runs brown out of the taps, the state had tried to take $5 million from the water fund and send it to a private Catholic college in Ohio that only grants degrees in Catholic studies for religious instruction and starting an anti-abortion think tank. West Virginians do not like it when you touch their government benefits, and they especially do not like Ohio. And so we teamed up with the ACLU and we got a blistering verdict from a state judge who said the money needed to be put back and used for constitutional purposes where it belongs. In Florida, a Bush-appointed federal judge ruled in our favor that taxpayer dollars cannot be used to host Christian prayer vigils. And that we forced the city of Ocala to settle, and that ruling is now precedent in federal law. And just 2 weeks ago, we won another ruling in federal court against the state of Arkansas that said it was illegal for them to erect a giant Ten Commandments monument in front of the state capitol and refuse monuments from any other religious group. Even the small victories. A couple weeks ago in Texas, we got a public school to take a bunch of religious art down off its walls in an elementary school. We are finding that the Constitution still holds if we fight for it. If we have the resources and the cleverness and the tenacity to go up against the Christian nationalists and the machine they built. Now, one of the things about what the Christian nationalists, the religious right, have done effectively is they have built power within institutions. They train people from school board members who are now today members of Congress. They worked hard to build a coalition of people who were loyal to them in the halls of power who would vote their way when they needed it. So in 2018, my predecessors at the AHA worked with Congressman Jamie Raskin and Congressman Jared Huffman to establish the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. And back then, it was just 4 members of Congress meeting in our conference room. But in the last year, it has become the fastest growing member-driven caucus in Congress. And it is now larger than the House Freedom Caucus. Have we heard of the Freedom Caucus? So our group of members of Congress is now larger than this caucus that has driven the opposition party off of a cliff. And when Democrats retake the House, we expect that the Congressional Free Thought Caucus is going to have tremendous ability to drive forward positive legislation to build a more pluralist America. We're not just working on symptoms, but we're working on causes. So the reason the religious right has been able to win these legal and political victories is they started by changing culture. Think about it. How many young men do we know who have been brought into what they call the red pill pipeline, or who have been converted to radical right-wing Christian nationalism by a video they saw on the internet? Those videos didn't get there by accident. There was a coordinated effort over many years to pour money by the religious right into taking over online media. So that when young people went online searching for purpose or meaning or community, they found somebody like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk to pipeline them into right-wing Christian nationalism. And so what we did last year because we are tired of staying on the sidelines while the religious right recruits young men into extremist ideologies on the internet. We launched our own Humanist Creator Fund. So Charlie Kirk got started with $10,000 from a mega donor on the Christian right. We are spending $10,000 a month to find the Charlie Kirk of humanism, so that when young people go to YouTube or TikTok or podcasts searching for a home and a way to bring coherence to an unjust world, they don't find Charlie Kirk or Jordan Peterson, they find a humanist. We also launched a couple months ago the American Empathy Project. On May 2nd, we're going to have a national day of service across the country. What's that?
I thought it was May 1.
May 2nd.
Oh, really?
Yep. A national day of service across the country on May 2nd. Because right now, when there is a tidal wave of cruelty coming from Washington, the best way that we can respond is by showing up for our neighbors. And people are going to look at who shows up for their neighbors and say, that's a group I want to be a part of. But more importantly, you have this axis of nonsense, the billionaires, the bishops, and the bigots. And the one thing they can agree on, because they can't agree on H-1B visas, and they can't agree on Israel, and they can't agree on abortion, and they can't agree on tax rates. But the one thing they agree on is that America has too much empathy for too many people. Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan, and he called empathy suicidal. Pete Hegseth's personal pastor went on a podcast and said empathy is sinful because it causes people to turn away from God for the sake of the neighbor. I can't think of a less Christian way to criticize empathy. I can't think of a worse way, period, to criticize empathy. While they go after empathy, 80% of Americans believe empathy is a fundamental American value, and we need more of it in this country. So we are showing up in communities, solving problems for people, and we are saying, if you believe that goodness comes not from stone tablets handed down from the sky, but from generosity and kindness to others, humanism is your tradition, and it's where you belong. We will win the way the religious right. Fight the culture war and build communities where people belong and content they can see themselves in. Build alliances in the halls of power and train our leaders to be good advocates for humanism. And fight them in the trenches in the legal battles where they are trying to take control of this country. And we are doing all this on the budget of less than one megachurch. Here's the real reason I'm optimistic, the reason I think we can win. The fight in this country is not between people who believe in God and people who don't. It's between people who believe this country belongs to all of us and those who believe it belongs to only them. Humanists will not win this fight alone. We never have. We will win by working in collaboration with progressive people of faith, and they will not win unless they embrace us. If we hold each other at arm's length, they will break us apart. But if we stand together, humanists and progressive Christians and Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and spiritually homeless seekers, they don't stand a chance. The axis of nonsense works so hard to divide us with fights about religion and culture because they know when we discover solidarity, it's over. Religious pluralism is what makes America great. It always has. It is one of our founding humanist ideas that none of us gets a free pass to force our beliefs on anyone else, and that everyone should have the freedom to live according to their own conscience. That is the fundamental idea that is under attack. It's what we're fighting to defend. It's what will bring together the broad, strange, beautiful American coalition to win. 250 years ago, in what he called the times that try men's souls, Thomas Paine told us, we have it in our power to begin the world over again. And humanists have been proving right ever since. So as I say, as for me and my house, we will serve humanity. Thank you all. I'm excited to take your questions.